The launch of the Long Road Australia's Train, Advise and Assist missions was hosted by the Australian Centre for the Study of Armed Conflict and Society, University of New South Wales, Canberra. The book was launched by the Deputy Chief of the Australian Army, Major General Rick Burr, DSC, AM, MVO, and was followed by a panel discussion. The panel comprised authors Colonel Brett Challoner, Lieutenant Colonel Mark O'Neill, and Ms. Wendy Hu, and it was facilitated by Professor Tom Frame.
Generally speaking, when I've been to launches where it's an edited collection, all you get is the editor complaining that no one took any notice of him when it came to a standardised system of referencing. And why should this book launch be any different, you might think? But we're going to transcend that, because I thought it'd be useful for you to hear something about why our colleagues thought it important that we should embark on this long road together. Mark O'Neill, let me first ask you, the idea for this book, a book that looked specifically at security force assistance, originated with you in a particular moment. Can you share something with us about that moment, where you were, what you thought, and perhaps would it actually have ended up like this?
Thanks, Tom. The moment was in Kandahar towards the end of 2014, and it was in Brett Challoner's office late one night, and we were kicking thoughts around about what did it all mean, and where do we go from here, and what was the point of it? Not in terms of what was the point of the mission, but what was the point of what we learned. And the style of leadership that Brett employed in the 205th Cat that year encouraged those sorts of thoughts. He created quite an environment where people could run things up the flagpole and see what happened. And I was struck that the sort of military books I'd seen coming out of our recent wars fell into three categories.
Good, bad and indifferent.
Well, it's one way of looking at it, and we can work out which one's which. We had ripping yarns of operators in the Hindu Kush. We had generals explaining how they won the war, and we had a range of historians with quite detailed but lengthy narratives. But I wasn't seeing or feeling any of the books that sort of informed my professional development, such as the works of John McEwen out of Vietnam, or Frank Kitson from the British colonial wars, or even our own Professor Bob O'Neill from his experience in Vietnam. And what I thought would be useful for practitioners and my fellow soldiers and people like Brett and I is for someone to actually analyse what had happened and what it meant, and try to give something back to the profession. And Brett encouraged that idea. We got together with Kenny, and he came on board, and off we went.
And Kenny, you and your colleagues have been working on security force assistance questions, challenges for some time. What did you particularly bring to this activity, and what did you try and explain in the chapter that people are going to read?
Okay, so I guess for me, and I can only speak from my experience, but after I think four deployments to sort of Afghanistan, looking at primarily the security force assistance role, it seemed like we did the logistics, we did all the sort of tech quite well. We were somewhat missing the human element, and I think train advise assist missions is a human endeavour. It's not something we can drone. It's something that's fundamentally relationships built. It's premised on who we send. It's premised on how we prepare the individual. And I think as an organisation, as sort of defence, we have an obligation. We actually have an obligation to actually prepare these individuals sort of well and expect then that they do quite well. So,
did you think that there wasn't the interpersonal connection? When you say the human element, was it the interpersonal connection? Our people maybe weren't connecting as well with those they were mentoring as well as they might.
There definitely was interpersonal elements and sort of issues, but primarily I think it was premised upon this need to actually prepare them we prepare them, I guess, they do their MRE and so forth, so...
MRE, tell us for those who are not familiar with that.
So the mission rehearsals of exercises, so they're out there in the bush rolling around, and they've got...
Out there in the bush rolling around.
But for the most part, they've got the infantry tactics fairly well sort of down pat. I think what we fail to prepare them sort of adequately, because we don't sort of view it as necessary, is that human and cultural element that they will actually be operating in. And when we're talking about TA mission, it's it's fundamentally about relationship. That's the primary principle of whether or not you're going to actually be able to influence your counterparts. So I think the need to actually concentrate our force preparation and maybe the whole raise, train, sustain sort of element on actually understanding, understanding the other.
So your contention is that not everybody can be a mentor, but a particular kind of person. Can you identify who they are from, let's say, a group of soldiers? That person would be suitable, that person wouldn't. Can you do that?
We've started to. So we did DSDO developed the pre-deployment training sort of framework premised on adult psychology, sort of model of actually learning, and we use stress as a mechanism to trigger actually memory. But for the most part, built into that, Deb's work, Deb Jefferson's work, which maps onto ours, looks at EQ and looks at specific characteristics of EQ.
EQ being
emotional intelligence.
not a cafe in Deakin.
Rather no, but we found that there's not all elements of emotional intelligence is actually good, is actually productive, but there are certain sort of characteristics and certain subscales that's actually required.
So we've been doing this for 100 years, and there's only some things now that we're beginning to realise are crucial for mission success.
I think the military leadership understands that it's crucial, but I think the element being it's hard. It's one of those intangible, it's not really sexy, you can't hold it, touch it. So for us though, what we've actually started to work on is a scale. So we're trying to sort of map it on, we're using a 360-degree training model as an assessment to actually see who will, as for the lack of a better word, fail during these scenarios. And and to be honest, if they're not quite sort of doing too well during the simulated workshop, then there may actually be a need to develop that individual a little further.
But Challoner, you've actually commanded an advisory team. What did you take most from it, perhaps in a personal and a professional sense? And where do you think, when you went there, now looking back, you perhaps weren't as well prepared as you might have been?
Tom, ladies and gentlemen, I think I very much acknowledge that our advisory team, who deployed in 2014, represented our moment in time, and we were A team, not B team. We had an example, an experience, not the experience. But clearly there were common threads, both with our predecessors and those who followed us. 2014, just by happenstance, was a particularly dynamic year, and dynamism is what I think underwrote our experience. The coalition was drawing down at the rapid rate. The nature of the mission and the environment was changing on a daily basis. And between when we were formed as a team in Australia to when we deployed, which was quite a short period of time, the method by which we had been directed to conduct operations changed 2 or 3 times. In the Australian context, I reflect, and I'm very thankful for the fact that Australian personnel, military personnel, are inherently well trained and I think culturally well suited to advising operations. So we probably shortcut the system and the process in terms of preparation.
Were there some nations that you felt, not saying you to say which ones they were, but were there some nations you felt that they either were not well prepared or temperamentally unsuited and perhaps undoing the good work you were trying to do?
Without reflecting on the last point, certainly we ended up as part of a team of 6 nations advising the Afghans. And this is very much about the context of the situation that you find yourself in. So, for example, the Afghans had many nations come through. They had very particular perspectives on those nations, going all the way back before the Russians, through the Russians, up to including the Americans and ourselves. From the Australian point of view, that it was good to be Australian. From the point of view of some of the other nations, particularly some of those perhaps associated with the Russians in the past, it was not so good. They were not set up for success. So that, not only did they have to deal with that context inside Afghanistan, they were probably not as well disposed as I think perhaps we are in Australia to generating relationships. And coming back to, the biggest problem that we had was the environment was changing constantly around us. We were looking to generate continuity and consistency, but we had nothing to gauge ourselves by other than our interactions with our Afghan counterparts and indeed our coalition partners on a daily basis.
And you talked about advising for a generation. Do you have a view as to how long, on average, I mean, a highly fluid world, but is it your view that we should, if we take on an advisory mission, it should be 1 year, 2 years, or should we perhaps steeling ourselves for 1 or 2 decades as our commitment?
Well, noting that I had the great privilege of advising General Abdul Hamid, who was the 205th Corps Commander, he was a 63-year-old two-star. He'd been in the fight since he was 13, and he was the one who first brought this idea of advising for a generation to the centre for me. Through that experience with him, I certainly became convinced that to make fundamental change, that was a requirement, certainly in Afghanistan and perhaps in most societies. From the point of view of our operations, I'm increasingly of the belief that when you generate a campaign plan, that advising operations should be one of the foundation stones that runs continuously throughout the execution of that campaign, even when you transition through pre-conflict up into combat operations and out the other side.
And Kendi, is it the case that you think science and technology has a lot to offer these missions in the future? And if so, what's perhaps one or two things you think particularly where DSTG Group can make a real difference?
I can only speak from my experience and I guess my sort of biased perspective, but one other sort of area that's a standout for me and has been done and mentioned by the CDS is Project Red Wing. So Project Red Wing is a counter-ID project, primarily tech focused, but it came about because there were findings to say that there's a sense of abandonment within the ANSF, by the coalition.
ANSF, who are they?
The Afghan National Security Forces.
Thank you.
And by their coalition counterparts. So this is seen in things like, the decrease in life support, Medivac, counter-ID equipments and so forth. So that was one of the highlights of the cultural compatibility report. Project Red Wing was, I guess, our goodwill, the Australian sort of Defence Force's goodwill to the Afghan security force, to show them, that there was no abandonment, that we did sort of care, and it's a fundamental element of, making what I believe a train advisor system mission between two partner nations credible. So there's a soft aspect of science that actually went on to inform a technological need, and for me, I think it beautifully illustrates that. So that's a project that sort of stands out for me. But I think going forth, other than the extant sort of S&T projects, will sort of remain and will assist the ADF with TAA missions.
Does the ADF know what it wants? Sometimes.
I think most of the time it sort of knows. I think it's a case of prioritising. It's an organisation that's time poor and it operates in a way where if it's not broken, it's a mindset. If it's not broken, maybe there's not a need to poke this thing. So for us though, to take it to a point where despite the fact that it's not broken, maybe we'd like to master this instead. That's the point where I think the STO could actually really assist in with the op evaluation, the analysis, the more, I guess, wicked, nuanced sort of problems, the human and cultural sort of domain. I think all of those elements are things that, DSTO will help in. But obviously going forth, cyber is a huge thing. It feeds well into the information warfare space. It's definitely an area that, going forth we need to look at, because we need to actually have that cutting edge. Shaping and influencing is a huge component.
Let me put it to you that people will have properly understood the place of science and technology when someone like you, who's deployed to Afghanistan, will do the dawn service address. You don't need to comment on that. But I wonder if the extent to which perhaps people don't know, one, that you've deployed, what you've done, is not part of the popular narrative, and perhaps when it becomes that, people will begin to see, I think, perhaps the broader contribution that science and technology has made and will make. Mark O'Neill, you talked about, right at the beginning of the journey, lessons learned. Now, we know that Army has a vast mechanism for learning lessons, but is it a case of lessons learned or lessons applied? Someone saying, yep, look, I need to take responsibility for that lesson, I'm going to do something. Is that the challenge, or have I misunderstood?
I think it's part of the problem set, Tom. The lessons learned, lessons identified are part of a process, a necessary process of learning and adaptation, but I don't think they're an end in itself. The end in itself is, for a profession such as the profession of arms, the application of that knowledge to a new problem set, the critical thinking that supports that. So the lessons learned, the lessons identified are valuable, and we need that reservoir of knowledge that professionals can go to. But I think what Sir Michael Howard said, no matter what we prepare for, what lessons we template for the next war, we will get it wrong. And the art of it is not being so far wrong that you can't get an azimuth back to right. So I think the lessons and the lessons we identified, combined with the professional mastery of our people, and that's where organisations such as DSTG and cooperation with academia are invaluable for us, because it's the professional soldier, sailor, airman, airwoman who can critically think about that and apply it to the new problem sets that we have coming down the track, which I think point the way ahead. And I think that's where the long road, I think, is useful, because it's now a resource that our future thinkers and our current thinkers can draw on.
So just one thing, 10 seconds. What do you hope people will draw from this book? Just one thing. Not putting you on the spot.
No, not at all. Thank you. The fact is that it's about thinking. This is a thinking person's game. War goes, winners are those who think. And the lessons that come through in the chapters from all the authors fundamentally all have the same premise, in that here's a problem described, but it's not a problem admired, because all of the authors have had critical thought and offered a way ahead.
And this is no less complicated than complex warfighting.
It's just war. And this is another form of warfare.
Thank you. Brett, what do you think? One thing you'd like people to take away from the book?
I think actually, if you look at the picture of Cameron Butler, he personifies what advising is all about. It's inherently a human endeavour, as is everything that we do. So as you read through the book, it doesn't matter whether you're in Afghanistan or in the South Pacific or in Uganda or somewhere else. The thread is common, and it's all about the person on the ground and how they interact with both their opponent or their adversary and their peers.
Candy?
I think in sort of, the idea came about because we actually wanted to drive change. We wanted to have people discuss this, be excited about it, and be inspired to actually go away and find solutions for what has been, I guess, a recurring motif since, as you sort of pointed out, Vietnam. We've been doing this for a while. We've been collecting lessons over and over again, and we don't actually produce any reports that look much differently from one conflict to the other. I think at what point is our organisation, Defence, going to stop collecting lessons and say we are going to redirect all of our energy towards finding solutions for, challenging topics. But I think we could do it. I think we're all, as an organisation, smart enough, passionate enough to actually do this. So I would like to challenge that, channel that energy towards solutions now.
So I haven't asked you the question, have any of them been effective? Have any of them brought about lasting change? Because I thought I'd just leave that with those who buy the book, take it home and come to their own mind. Would you please thank our panelists?
For the first time, The Long Road analyses the successes and failures of Australia's train, advise and assist missions over the past 50 years in Iraq, Afghanistan, Papua New Guinea, Bougainville, Solomon Islands, South Vietnam and Uganda. The authors explore the complex challenges Australia faces in its protracted journey towards being better prepared to build security capacity and effective partnerships within conflict-ravaged nation-states it hopes to assist.